I just wanted to make a shorter video, hopefully, on a mechanic that I used in a previous project that we're going to be using for the 3D platformer. I wanted to make this a separate video because it's more of something that everyone can use, and it would be enemy spawners for random encounters like so. Now, I mean, the highlight here isn't really enemies per se, but it's more over the logic of the spawner. As you can see, still some glitchiness with that, but that's not the highlight that I'm trying to show off. It would be the spawner. If I can find the logic, where would it be? Here it is. So we got spawners, corrupted shrooms. So basically, we're not going to go this in depth, but I wanted to make it like really configurable. We're not going to be doing it that much, but as you can see in here, we got respawnable, respawn when a player leaves. It can despawn when the player leaves. Clear respawn time, spawn area, spawn range, enemy count. So you can make a lot of customizable stuff with this system that I have specifically. We're going to make a basic version of this, but this is mainly just a random enemy spawner. So like every time you spawn it, it's going to be in a different place. Not particularly and just like spawned on top of each other. And that's a complex math logic thing that I did here. It just gets a random point on a circular plane, and we're going to be using this microchip in the actual logic. I'm not going to be recreating it because it is just a lot of math. We got cosine and sine approximations here. Math. Distance, which is even more math. Beta, which is even more math. So, yeah. That sine. A good thing for signal generators are actually random number generators. You can get nice random number results like this. That's what this is. And that's how you get random point. But yeah, we're going to be using that, so I just wanted to show that specifically. Random rotation, we don't have to do rotation, but this is basically the same thing. It gives a random Y rotation, so they end up facing different directions. So let's go ahead and get into the actual making our own version of this. Just gonna not save, and we're gonna be doing it with our booger character. So we're gonna go ahead and bring them in here after we make a platform for them to stand on. I don't know why I chose contraption. Probably because it is technically contraption. We're not necessarily making a game scene. It's more over logic, so that's why we're doing contraption. We go ahead and bring in our character that we want to spawn, which is right here. This guy, we're going to be spawning him. And we're also going to want to get our logic piece random, and I do have this published on the Dreamiverse. Random position on the circular plane, which is easy to get, so there we go. So now, of course, what we're doing here is we're just making a piece of logic. So we're going to go ahead and grab a microchip, and I'm going to go ahead and name it enemy spawner. And the trick to these is you have a few options with this. By default, in my spawner, it acts as like a trigger zone, where if you enter the trigger zone, it spawns in the enemies, But I do have manual overrides right here, which would be spawn trigger and despawn trigger. So if you enter an area, for example, and you have like a cave or something, or like a wall set up so you can't see a big open area, and the whole point of this system is to free up gameplay thermometer and to also lower the impact on your FPS, because the more puppets, specifically puppets, degrade FPS performance. Almost it comes in second compared to paintings. The game hates paintings, but Media Molecule refuses not to use them because they are really inexpensive on the thermometer, but the game will chug like hell if you have like more than one painting asset on the screen at the same time. Like, we can go into the okay, so yeah, this system, this is what we're gonna want to make. Depending on what you want, you can either simply have a trigger zone that will spawn in the enemies, and when the player leaves the trigger zone, we'll have them despawn. Or we could have a toggle system set up with nodes, so spawn and despawn. Oh no. And this would basically trigger this, and then the not gate for this that we're going to set up later to despawn stuff would be this. So that way, if you're like walking down a path and you take a turn, they will spawn after that turn, and then when you leave the turn or head back the way you came, they can despawn, so you're not using up as much thermometer. Of course, this relies on just making things random, because if we made like a group of enemies, like so, it's actually going to take up more gameplay space if we were to just turn them off and then like spawn in a group than spawning just one randomly throughout the entire map. Because if we just have this one puppet somewhere in your scene and have it turned off and then emit it, it's going to be a lot cheaper than you know, emitting groups or having them turn on and off throughout your scene. So yeah, it's going to save you a lot of thermometer space as well as give you some FPS. So to get started, we have our logic bit here, and it's an enemy spawner. We got a trigger zone here, and this is going to go ahead and detect possessed controller sensors. So that would be player, or we can use these. We can probably use either or, but that requires another logic chip that I have that's pre-set up, and I know some of you people don't like using them. So yeah, I'd rather just keep it down to a minimal amount as possible. Like, this is just math, so math, if you want to go ahead and copy it, go ahead. Just don't publish it, please. The chips specifically. But now we're going to go ahead and get started. So if we spawn something, we're going to need an emitter. So we're going to go ahead and go to our gadgets, louvers and output section. We're going to grab an emitter, and this is what's going to go ahead and let us spawn our enemy. So we're going to go ahead and set this up now. So every time we emit a group of enemies, we're going to be emitting multiple times, and we don't want to shoot them out with a speed, and we want it to be instant, and we're going to be emitting once. Max emitted, that doesn't really matter, but 20 is a good number for puppets. And obviously we want to be able to adjust how many that we're going to emit, so we're going to grab a slider from our sensors and input, value slider at the very end, and this is just going to be amount of enemies. And I'm going to go ahead and set the maximum to 10. And from there, what we can do is we're just going to extend out our logic chip like so. And this trigger zone is what we're going to be doing the logic on, but basically it would be the same way to do this than what we're going to be doing. So when we enter this, we're going to want to spawn this amount of enemy, and we want the minimum amount of enemy to be 1 at least. So every time that we trigger this, we want to spawn an enemy. And this is a more basic version of this. I am going to be publishing this one specifically. I don't think I have it published as of yet, but I will be publishing this one if you want something pre-made. But if you're here to learn, then let's go ahead and learn. So we're gonna go ahead and grab a counter, because we need to count the amount of times that we're gonna spawn with the emitter. And we're also gonna grab a timer, because we want something to pulse every like 0.1 seconds. So that's just going to give us a pulse every 0.1 seconds. And this way we can easily keep track of the emitter. So now we're going to want another counter. So we're going to go ahead and copy this, because we want to know when we triggered it, and if we did trigger it, then we're going to go ahead and keep counting up. So, and then this counter, we can go ahead and open the properties of this, and we're going to take this amount of enemy slider, and we're going to put the value output to this counter right here. It can be modulate or overwrite, it doesn't really matter. So now we have this timer and this counter. So when we are emitting enemies, we want to say, well, we know the player had entered the zone, so we're going to go ahead and start emitting. And we know that we want to emit once every time this timer goes up. And we also know that every time that we trigger this emitter, we're going to count this up, because we know we've counted up 1 in the emitted. So we're going to go ahead and grab an AND gate, because we want all those conditions to be true. And a counter will have a counter full, and since this is 1, we know we want a NOT gate, because if this is full, we have already emitted the amount of enemies that we want, so we're going to go ahead and output counter full to NOT gate. And then this NOT gate is going to go ahead and plug into our AND gate, as well as this timer for the timer finish pulse. And if one last input is going to be our player has activated the enemy zone. And now we have a basic setup for emitting stuff, but at the moment, if we go ahead and did this and just had it emit, it'll probably just emit in the same place and explode. So we can go ahead and hook up the result. And then trigger zone, we'll also put in a button as well, just to test stuff out without an actual player around. And we know when the player is not in the zone, then we're going to despawn. So I'm actually going to make a different trigger zone for that, because you probably want there to be some leniency on the despawn. So on the range for the despawn. So we're going to have a copy of it, hook that one up to a NOT gate, so when they're not in this, we're going to go ahead and tell our emitter on the second page of the properties of the emitter to destroy all the emitted objects. So that way we're not chewing up FPS with the puppets that we would spawn. And what else do we need? This one doesn't need a start, but this one does. And of course this NOT gate will also reset our counter for detecting if our player is entered, as well as the amount emitted. And now, if we go ahead and play, hit that button, that shouldn't be happening. Why is, oh, you know what? Because this AND gate needs to go into our counter here for the amount emitted into increase count. And now it should only increase the amount that we told it to emit. And if I get another, I have to get another switch set up for up here because we didn't account for that. And they went away, and now they despawn. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and increase the amount of enemies to show you that this wouldn't necessarily look good. Let's do 5. See, they all stack on top of each other, like so. So it's not going to be very pretty when your player walks through and they see a bunch of enemies like this. So that's where this comes in, random point on a circular plane. So we got randomize, the circle middle, and the diameter. So the diameter is how large the circle is. Like, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think the radius is half the diameter. So the radius would be, or is the radius the whole? I think I did name this wrong. I don't think it is the diameter. I don't know. I think the diameter would be, I don't know. Radius, well, hold on, let me just actually Google this. Okay, no, I was right. Yeah, so a diameter of the circle is going to be like the entire width of it, and the radius would be half of that. So we're basically asking for how big the circle is, which we can do with the output of this. So we got zone size is 18 meters, so we're just going to plug that into our diameter input, and circle middle. Actually no, we don't. I don't think we want it to be this big. No, we definitely don't. So we're going to copy another trigger zone, and we're just going to use this as something to visualize how big our zone is for spawning. And we know we want it to be about that size for now. That looks good. And again, we're just going to plug that into the diameter circle middle. So that's basically the center point of our circle. That's in case you don't want it to be where your logic chip is. But I think I have it set up in a way where we have to have an input. So we're going to go ahead and grab a tag. Just pop it down. We don't need to name it or anything. We're going to grab a splitter. So basically, tags, this little point here is their physical representation in the world of where they are. And that actually is output to a transform in this. And a transform is a position, rotation, and scale. And scale is just 1, usually. And translation and rotation is the position in the world, and of course the rotation. And we just are interested in the actual physical point, so that would be the translation. That's going to go into the circular middle. And then randomize, that will tell us to actively randomize the point that we are going to be giving the emitter. So if we open up the emitter, actually, and then go to inputs and outputs, you'll have a scene space transform. And that scene space transform is actually what this circle is right here. So we're going to be telling the this emitter where to emit completely random based on this random point on a circular plane. So let me go ahead and we're going to grab a combiner from the logic and processing section. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and we're going to do the transform value, which is right here. Why can't I grab that? There we go. And it's going to go ahead and ask us for a few things. For example, it's going to ask for a rotation, scale, and our translation. Well, we already have the translation, which is the random position. And of course, we're going to randomize every single tick of this timer. So we're going to grab the pulse output from our timer and put that into the random point on a circular plane. That way, it's always random, and it doesn't start being random after this outputs. It's always randomizing, basically. And then we need a rotation. For now, we'll just use the tags rotation. So that's going to give us just them all facing in one direction, which if you don't want, we're going to change that later. And then scale, we want that to be 1, and we can easily get a value of 1 using a button or a slider, or a switch and a slider, excuse me. So I'm going to grab a switch, and I don't know if many of you knew this, but you can open the properties of a switch and a slider, and you can make it switch visible in the scene. This way we can easily just get a number and just put it down, and we'll plug that into the scale. And now we can go ahead and plug the combiner output into our emitter scene space transform input on the second page. And now every single time it emits, it should be random. Well, it should be random. Let's see. What is going wrong here? Because I was able to see it, so I was able to see it was random here. I have no idea what's going on. You know what? I think what might be happening is Dreams doesn't have consistency with numbers for some reason. Yeah, as you can see here, we get 62.35 for the diameter, but we're outputting 18 from the... No, not even. We're outputting 3.6. So it's probably taking that number and just giving us a ridiculous, like, area for it to emit in. So we're probably going to have to change that, either with this slider or do some math to convert it. And I think, let's see here, I have spawn area. Where is this? Yeah, we just have it set up with a slider, so we're gonna have to do that instead of a trigger zone, because I don't know why Media Molecule decided to have this and be represented like this, like 62.35. I can't even find a, like, mathematical reason for it, because 3 meters is like 100 centimeters, and it's 51.96. Like, what even is that? Like, how does that convert? It's like divide or multiply by 8 point something something. I don't know why. It's so weird. So I'm just gonna go ahead and grab this slider and rename it to the area size. And no, our logic is really messy right now. It's because I just wanted to make a video about this topic, because I'm going to be using this in our game without making it in there. So, or the 3D platformer. Area size, we're just going to plug that into the diameter. And we had it at about 3. Now maybe it should work. There it is. There we go, and now we get random results every time. So now, if a player wanders into this area, they'll find random enemies everywhere, basically. And of course, if you wanted to, we could make it so they don't spawn in the air by just bringing this enemy spawner down a little bit lower to the ground. And yeah, that's about it, except we also want to get a random rotation, which is pretty easy. The way I do it in here, I think is a bit more unnecessary than it needs to be, but, you know, I think, like, I'm not sure what this is about, actually. 361. Yeah, it just basically gets the output of this and multiplies it by 360 to get a random Y rotation, which is fine. So we'll go ahead and do that over here as well. So basically, in order to get a random number, what we want to do is we're going to freeze the random number when we get the randomize, or we're not going to freeze when we get it. So it's always frozen unless we get that randomized input. So basically it'll be static until you get the randomized input. So what we want is a combiner. It's going to be a rotational combiner. So rotation. We want a signal generator. And sweep seconds is going to be 0. Max value range, the minimum is going to be 0. And min value range, the... well, hold on. We had just... so min max is 1, basically, I think. There we go. So 0, 1, 0, 1. So now we're going to get a random number, basically. And we're going to go ahead and get a signal generator. And we're going to take the input from our node here that we placed, and we're going to put it into freeze output. And then our signal generator is going to plug into our signal manipulator right here. And then we're going to just get a calculator, and we're going to set B using L1 and square to 360. So we have 360 degrees. Some bad input drift. And we're going to multiply that signal manipulator output by 360, and then that's going to go to Y. So now we're basically going to get a random Y rotation. Now you could randomize all your rotation, but that doesn't really matter with puppets, because Y is the only thing that matters. This is a Y rotation. And this is X rotation. And then I can't really show you Z rotation. I can. This is Z rotation. Like this. So Y would be rotating so they face a different direction, basically. And we're going to go ahead and grab another node to output from. And we're going to output our combiner, and that's going to go ahead, go into our combiner here. Then we're going to get that same randomization input from our circular plane and put it into our random rotation input. And now they have random rotations. And it does take a little bit to spawn them. You can theoretically speed it up by using a NOT gate. If you hook it up into itself, it's even faster than a timer. Like, you can't even tell that it's turning off half the time. So if we did that instead, it should be faster to spawn, but it could also be more glitchy. So hopefully it's not that glitchy anymore. I don't know. Yeah, this is as fast as they'll spawn. Alright, so that was pretty easy. Way easier than what this is, but I'd made this to be like extremely configurable. So this is something that you can put together by yourself, except for this. I could explain this, but it's just insane. Some of it is, at least. And if we wanted to do the spawn and despawn, that's pretty easy. We'll go ahead and delete our switches here and our trigger zone and our NOT gate. Despawn, our input for that would just hook up to the reset counter for both of our counters, and it would also go into the destroy emitted objects input on our emitter, and then the spawn output would increase the count on our counter right here. So basically we can just place down 2 switches on the outside now, and now we could spawn and despawn at will. So basically, if you were to make like a walled system, what I would recommend is if we have like an entrance here and we have a wall here, you would have 2 trigger zones set up, and basically it would look like this. You would have one here, and this would detect when the player is entering the area, and then you would have one like over here. You'd probably want to use a square shape or cube instead of you know, circles, because that's better. And we'd hook up this one right here to spawning, of course, and then when they are in significant clearance of the room, you can despawn them. So now if we actually place down just a random puppet that we can possess, we can go ahead and test it out. Just a blank puppet. We walk over, you can see that they're spawned, and then we leave the room, and they should have despawned, and you can see from the thermos that they have, as you can see. And we can walk back over, and they're here. New set every time. So despawn, spawn, remember the position, and completely different position from last time. Alright, so that's everything for this video. I hope you liked it. So again, I'm going to be making this specific microchip published. Not this scene, just this microchip. Because this one is a lot better than what we did here. Simply because it gives you a lot more options. And like, they can even respawn after a certain amount of time. Like, you can make it so once you clear the area, you don't have to worry about it. So yeah. Yeah, I hope you all like this video. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I also got a Patreon if you're interested in that. Might have just bopped my microphone on accident. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.